She smiled as she fired me from the kitchen I spent 7 years building from the ground up. That was the moment I swore, I'd burn her empire to the ground, with my own 2 hands. It was a Tuesday. That kind of Tuesday where the light outside is too bright for the mood inside. I was called into the office upstairs, though I didn't need to be told why. I'd seen the signs. Whispers among the investors. A marketing team I'd never approved bringing in branding consultants during prep hours. Dishes being sent back during service, not by customers, but by her. Chloe Whitman. She sat behind the sleek, glass desk that once belonged to my mentor, flanked by a digital mood board glowing from her laptop. She didn't look up when I entered. "We need to talk, Marcus," she said, her tone saccharine but clipped. Like a blade dipped in honey. "Sure," I replied, standing still. Her manicured nails danced across the laptop trackpad. A mock-up of the Iron Fig, reimagined hovered on screen. Neon colors. Fusion sushi sliders. Cocktail smoke. God help me. "I've been reviewing the performance metrics," she said, finally glancing up. "The numbers are strong. But your menu, it's not forward-facing. It's, well, let's be honest, it's dated." "It's timeless," I said. "It's stale," she countered, flashing a tight-lipped smile. That smile. I'd seen it before. When she first walked into the kitchen, pretending to be a fan of my food. She'd talked about preserving culinary soul, about elevating tradition with respect. Lies, all of it. Pretty lies packaged with strategic eye contact and that calm, practiced tone that investors ate up like overpriced microgreens. "Where exactly are we going with this?" I asked, though I already knew. She leaned back in her chair, like this was a yoga retreat and not a gutting of someone's life work. "We're going in a new direction. We're bringing in a new executive chef with experience in modern fusion. It's not personal, Marcus. It's business. You've done amazing work here, truly, but your vision no longer aligns with ours." I didn't flinch. Didn't blink. Just breathed in, slowly. "How long do you need me to stay for the transition?" I asked. That caught her off guard. I could see it. She thought I'd grovel. That I'd beg to keep the title, the kitchen, the keys to my own creation. 2 weeks, she said after a beat, her voice now cautious. "And of course, I'll need the full breakdown of all signature recipes. Ingredient lists, prep instructions, timing, plating. Everything." I nodded. "Just once." "Of course." And right then, she smiled. Not politely. Not professionally. No. That smile was relief. That smile was victory. That smile was a woman who thought she'd won. But she didn't know what she didn't know. She didn't know those recipes had never been written down in full. That the flavor of my braised lamb depended on the moisture level of the rosemary I picked that day. That my seafood stew adjusted in acid depending on the temperature of the shrimp, on how early they'd been pulled from the boat. That my olive oil cake rose or fell depending on the humidity in the kitchen and the hand that stirred it. She didn't understand that food wasn't math, it was memory. That night, I stayed late. The kitchen was closed, the stainless steel counters wiped clean, the lights off except for the one over the bar. I sat in silence with a tumbler of Barolo, my last bottle from the year Teresa died. Her ghost lingered in every corner of that kitchen. She'd always said the scent of roasted garlic and basil made her feel safe. I remembered her sitting on the counter with her sketchbook while I tested recipes. She'd been an artist before the cancer devoured her hands. I looked around and saw not steel and tile, but 7 years of my life stitched into every surface. The nick on the prep table where I dropped my grandfather's knife. The scorch mark under the far burner, my first big mistake, still hidden by the shadow of the shelf. This kitchen wasn't just a space. It was my cathedral. And Chloe had desecrated it. She hadn't just fired me. She'd cut me out of my own legacy, stripped the soul from something sacred, and repackaged it as trendy noise for likes and engagement metrics. I took another sip of wine. It tasted like smoke. The next morning, I packed my knives. Derek, my sous chef, walked in just as I was rolling them up into their leather pouch. His brows furrowed as he crossed the kitchen floor, his sneakers scuffing the tile like a whisper of worry. "Chef," he asked. "What the hell's going on?" "She let me go," I said, without looking up. "What? But, why?" "New vision," I said flatly. "Modern, fresh, trendy. But this place, Marcus, we're booked out for 6 weeks." I zipped the pouch closed. "It's not mine anymore." He stepped back like I'd struck him. "But the food, it's your food. This whole place is you." I shrugged. "Not anymore." As I stepped outside that night, the air was warmer than it should have been. Spring was bleeding into summer. The sign above the iron fig glowed in that soft yellow hue that always reminded me of home. The last place that ever felt like home. I stared at it for a long moment. My name wasn't on the building, but it might as well have been. Every table, every screw in the past shelf, every damn sauce on the menu was mine. And now, it was hers. Something twisted inside me. Not sadness. Not grief. It was sharper than that. It was the quiet snap of a man hitting bottom, and deciding to dig his way up. She thought she'd taken everything from me. She had no idea what I was still capable of. And when I was done, the iron fig would be nothing more than scorched earth under the heel of my boot. A week passed. 1 week of watching from the outside as Chloe Whitman played house with my legacy. She rebranded the restaurant the Iron Fig 2.0. Of course she did. New signage, new logo, new tagline, where tradition evolves. Her announcement came with a press release and a smirking photo of her standing next to Brandon Kelly, the innovative new culinary visionary she'd brought in to replace me. Brandon was everything I wasn't. Young, flashy, addicted to Instagram reels. I'd seen a few of his videos before. He cooked like a magician in a fog machine, lots of vapor, very little soul. He called his cooking experiential. That was his word. Not good, not honest, not delicious. Experiential. And that's who she chose to replace me with. I didn't need to taste his food. I already knew what it lacked. But what stung more than anything was finding out who stayed. Leo. He'd been with me from the second year. Helped build the grill section from the ground up. Taught himself to debone a whole lamb blindfolded, just for fun. The guy had skill, and he knew my food. He knew me. So when Sasha called and said she saw him training Brandon's team on my techniques, I didn't want to believe it. Then came the message from Derek. "Leo sold your recipes. Full list." Chloe paid him off. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The betrayal wasn't surprising, but it still cracked something in me. But then I heard the second part. Chloe had fired Leo 2 days later. Dumped him like expired produce the second she milked him dry. That's what you get when you sell your soul to someone who doesn't even know what it's worth. I didn't reach out. I didn't rage or rant. I just let the silence speak for itself. 2 days after that, my lights went out. Literally. I was cooking pasta in my tiny kitchen when the overhead bulb flickered twice, then died. The fridge shut off. A second later, so did the AC. Then came the knock at the door. It was my landlord, chewing gum like he was trying to bite the day in half. "Marcus," he said, not unkindly. 3 months, man. I can't float you anymore. I'm sorry. I nodded. I didn't argue. I didn't have the money. Not anymore. I sat in the dark for hours that night, the smell of half-cooked pasta lingering like a joke I didn't get. It was time. Not to give up, but to go back. Santino's trattoria had been closed for nearly a decade. My grandfather opened it in 1949, ran it with one knife in both hands until the arthritis got too bad. Then he gave it to my father, who ran it like a bank account instead of a kitchen. Eventually, it crumbled under debt, dust, and broken promises. But the building was still there, tucked into a forgotten corner of South Boston. The sign out front was cracked. Weeds grew through the cracks in the concrete. A yellowed note taped to the door read, "Not for lease." But the key still worked. Inside, it smelled like time and silence. The floor creaked like it remembered footsteps. Old ovens, rusted with memory, sat like forgotten gods waiting for prayer. I stood in the center of the main room and whispered, "I'm home." Sasha came the next day. She didn't ask what we were doing. She just brought gloves, a mop, and a look that said, "Let's rebuild." We started with the back kitchen. Dust thick enough to write in. Boxes stacked like tombs. But underneath it all, the bones were still good. It had soul. We were scrubbing the old walk-in fridge when Sasha stopped. "There's something jammed behind this," she said, crouching near the base of the shelving unit. I knelt beside her. The metal frame had shifted forward an inch or two. She tugged. Something gave way with a dry crack. Behind it was a shallow wooden drawer, hidden, dusty, sealed shut with time. My heart slowed as I reached for it. The wood was warped, but after a few tugs, it slid open. Inside was a folded letter. Yellowed. Fragile. On the front, in thick, slanted ink, "For whoever finds this next." I opened it carefully. There was once a man I trusted like a brother. He said he believed in tradition. In family. But he took my recipes and opened his own place across town. Called it his own. Ruined my name. He didn't just take food. He took trust. Reputation. Blood. If you're reading this, don't let history repeat itself. WW didn't deserve my friendship. Don't let someone like him wear your legacy like a mask. Santino. I sat back, the words vibrating in my chest. WW. I didn't know who that was yet. But my grandfather had buried that letter like a landmine, for me to find. Someone had stolen from him, just like someone had stolen from me. A theft of lineage. Of name. Of soul. And suddenly, it wasn't just about Chloe anymore. This was generational. That night, I slept on the floor of the trattoria. No bed, no light, just me and the quiet. But I wasn't alone. I had the letter. I had the smell of flowers still ghosting the walls. And I had something I hadn't felt in weeks. Purpose. Chloe had tried to erase me. But I'd found something stronger than revenge. Legacy. And I'd burn her empire down with it. 2 months passed. I didn't post a single photo. Didn't send out one press release. Didn't whisper a word to the food blogs or call in a favor from the critics I'd fed for years. But every morning, I unlocked the doors to the old trattoria and got to work. No hashtags. No PR. No launch party. This revenge would be quiet. Precise. Surgical. I would build Santino's table not as a comeback, but as a resurrection. The floors came first, hand-sanded oak, the same as when my grandfather laid them down in 1952. I kept the iron oven handles, still bearing the curve of his fingerprints. The walls got nothing but a fresh coat of paint and the smell of roasted garlic. The light fixtures. Vintage brass sconces my grandmother used to polish after every service. Every nail, every tile, every screw, I chose like a man remembering, not designing. This wasn't a restaurant. It was a rebirth. But it came at a cost. I sold my car. I maxed out my last 2 credit cards. Liquidated what was left in Teresa's life insurance payout, something I'd sworn never to touch. Every dollar I had was now inside those walls. One bad inspection, one slow opening month, one missing permit, and I'd be out on the street with nothing but a rusted cast iron skillet and a scarred reputation. It didn't matter. I wasn't doing this to survive. I was doing this to bury her. A week into renovations, a letter arrived, thick envelope, firm paper, gold-trimmed edge. Return address, Whitman Legal, LLP. Chloe had sent in the lawyers. The letter was everything I expected, a formal cease and desist, citing breach of a non-compete agreement I'd signed when the Iron Fig changed ownership. The language was loaded: material damage to intellectual property, unauthorized use of derivative culinary concepts. She didn't just want to scare me. She wanted to kill this place before it even took a breath. I drove to Cambridge that same afternoon to meet Cameron Lang, a business and IP attorney I'd worked with years ago when I trademarked a line of sauces that never got off the ground. Cameron read the letter twice, frowned once, then leaned back in his chair. "This is saber-rattling," he said. "There's language here, but it's thin. They're trying to make it sound like you're copying yourself. Can they stop me?" "Not if we're smart," he said. "You're not duplicating the Iron Fig. You're opening a traditional Italian restaurant. Different aesthetic, different clientele, different culinary style." I nodded. "Then let's be very smart." That same night, Sasha and I stayed late doing inventory in the cellar. We drank cheap Chianti out of mismatched glasses while measuring dry goods and talking through plating flow. It was Sasha who said it. "You know what this really is, right?" "What?" "A psychological war. You're not just building a new restaurant, you're rewriting memory." I looked at her. "She's feeding people a lie. Telling your regulars your food was boring, outdated. You want to win. You don't fight that with food. You fight it with guilt. With loss." I didn't say anything, but the idea buried itself in my spine. Sasha was right. Chloe didn't just steal my kitchen, she was trying to erase the emotional blueprint of what that food meant to people. My job wasn't just to outcook her. It was to remind the people she fooled that she betrayed them too. Over the next few weeks, I got to work. Quietly, methodically. I started building what I called the list. Derek helped me put it together: dozens of names, addresses, reservation histories. People who'd eaten at the Iron Fig every week. People who cried over my olive oil cake. Who sent holiday cards addressed to Chef Marcus. Who brought in their grandkids and whispered, "This is just like my grandmother used to make." I didn't ask for reviews. I just sent them handwritten letters. Nothing dramatic. Just a note. "If you're ever missing something that tastes like home, I'm cooking again." And they came. One by one. Quietly. Like pilgrims returning to a shrine someone tried to pave over. Around this time, Leo showed up. He came through the back, unannounced. Sasha saw him first and nearly threw a flour sack at his head. I stepped out from the prep station, arms crossed, apron dusted in semolina. Leo didn't say anything for a moment. He just took off his hat, eyes lowered. "I know what I did," he said. "And I'm not here to ask for a second chance." "Then what are you here for?" I asked. "To wash dishes," he said. "No paycheck. Just, to be part of something real again." I didn't say yes. But I stepped aside. And I let him in. Late one night, while flipping through old documents left in the office, I returned to the letter we'd found in the hidden drawer. The words still cut like lemon over a fresh wound. He didn't just take food. He took trust. Reputation. Blood. But this time, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. In the bottom right corner, tiny, elegant initials, faded with time. WW. The thief. The man who betrayed my grandfather. The name burned into the page like a forgotten scar. WW. Not a name I recognized. Not yet. But I'd find him. I went to the Boston Public Records office the next morning. Requested archives on defunct restaurants from the 1960s. Anything tied to Santino's Trattoria, or lawsuits filed between restaurateurs in the North End during that era. It would take time. But I wasn't just fighting Chloe now. I was fighting for a legacy that had been bleeding for decades. And I was done letting it die quietly. The pieces were falling into place. The kitchen was finished. The permits were approved. The letters were sent. And the fire inside me had sharpened into something surgical. Not rage. Not spite. Just purpose. Chloe had underestimated me. She thought I'd go quietly. She thought she could replace me with smoke and foam. But I had something she didn't. I had memory. And memory, when sharpened right, cuts deeper than any knife. We opened with no banners. No influencer deals. No grand opening, signs or string lights or hashtags. Just 12 tables. A handwritten menu in cursive ink, smudged in one corner because my hand still shook slightly when I wrote. And above the kitchen pass, bolted to the brick wall, hung my grandfather's copper pot, dented, scorched and absolutely perfect. That night, we served 16 covers. The next night, 23. By the end of the week, people were lining up outside. They came quiet. Like survivors returning to something they thought had burned down. They didn't want trendy. They wanted familiar. They didn't want spectacle. They wanted soul. And that's exactly what we gave them. I ran the pass every night, just like I used to. Derek ran the grill. Sasha handled the pastry line like a surgeon with a scalpel. Leo washed dishes in silence, head down, earning back his place one plate at a time. There was no music except what bled softly from the dining room. No shouting. No chaos. Just the rhythm of a team that knew how to move like breath through lungs. Then, 2 weeks in, Sasha came in holding her phone like it was radioactive. "Marcus," she said, her voice low. "You need to read this." It was a review. No name. No byline. Just a long-form piece posted on a respected underground culinary blog. The kind that critics read but never admit to following. The soul that once lived inside the Iron Fig did not disappear. It simply moved across town. Santino's table isn't a comeback. It's a resurrection. It doesn't shout. It breathes. And every bite reminds you what food used to mean before we tried to turn it into theater. 5 stars. Accompanied by a photo of my olive oil cake, perfectly cracked across the top, dusted with powdered sugar, glowing in amber light. And then the last line. "What you're tasting isn't nostalgia. It's defiance." We didn't post it. We didn't have to. The next night, the line wrapped around the block. 3 days later, Chloe called me. I didn't pick up the first time. Or the second. She showed up the third. Not at the restaurant. She wasn't that bold. She waited outside my building, leaning against a black Escalade like a politician waiting for a photo op. I almost turned around. But something told me to face it. She didn't waste time. "Can we talk?" she asked, stepping away from the car. I said nothing, just kept walking toward the building's side entrance. "I'll make it worth your time," she added. That stopped me. She followed me up the fire stairs, heels clicking on the concrete like a metronome counting down to something inevitable. In my apartment, she didn't sit. Just paced. "The critics are turning," she said. "Our numbers are dropping. We've had cancellations. Influencers are asking why their food looks different than last time." I leaned against the counter. Said nothing. "I'm prepared to offer you 20% equity in the Iron Fig," she said finally. You can run the kitchen again. Full creative control. I'll drop the lawsuit. I stared at her. Not at her clothes, or her carefully rehearsed expression. I stared at her eyes. They looked tired. Not broken. But scared. Why? I asked. Because whatever the hell it is you're doing over there, it's working. And you know we can't recreate it. Even with your recipes. I almost smiled. Almost. You had all of it, I said. Everything I gave you. Everything I built. And you tore it down for a photo op. I made a business decision. And I'm making mine. She exhaled slowly. You really think you can sustain this? One little restaurant, against the full weight of my. I held up a hand. You're not listening. This isn't about competing with you. This is about replacing you. Her mouth opened. Closed. I appreciate the offer, I said, but no. And then I opened the door for her to leave. She didn't say anything else. Just walked out with the posture of someone who's used to getting their way and isn't sure how to handle the absence of it. That night, my father showed up. No call. No warning. Just knocked on the side door of the kitchen while we were cleaning down after service. He looked older than I remembered. Paler, too. But there was something sharp still living in his posture, like he hadn't completely given up the fight. I heard, he said simply. You're cooking again. I nodded, unsure where this was going. I was wrong, he added after a moment. About how you left school. About what you chose. I didn't do it for anyone else, I said. I know. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a battered leather-bound book. I recognized it instantly. Grandpa's recipe journal, I whispered. He held it out. I kept it locked up. Thought I'd give it to you when you were ready. Guess you've been ready longer than I knew. I opened it right there, hands trembling. The pages were yellowed. Smudged in places. Full of notes in the margins and little symbols only my grandfather ever understood. But near the middle, I saw it. A torn edge. And just above it, a name scribbled in the margin. Olio d'Arancia, 1973. The olive oil cake. The original version. Gone. Ripped out. The version Chloe had never quite been able to replicate, no matter how many test batches she ran. This page, I said. It's the missing piece. My father nodded. She's trying to copy it, isn't she? She can't. I ran my finger along the ragged edge. I didn't need the page. The flavor lived in my bones. But now I knew it was missing for a reason. There was a war happening. Not one with knives or lawyers. But with memory. With hands. With taste. She was playing a game of flash and illusion. And I was feeding ghosts. It was a Tuesday again, like most things that change your life seem to be. 3 months had passed since we first reopened Santino's table. 3 months since I turned the gas back on in a kitchen built by memory and served plates seasoned with grief and grit. I was prepping for the lunch rush, elbow deep in flour, when the door creaked open. I didn't look up. I knew that walk. That hesitation. That cough like someone testing if they still belonged in the space they left behind. Harlan Quinn, the man said, stepping into the kitchen with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. You cook like your grandfather. I wiped my hands, blinked. You're late, I said. He chuckled. He always said that to me, too. Harlan was an old friend of my grandfather's. A semi-retired lawyer now, but back in the 60s, he was one of the only people my grandfather trusted with anything that involved contracts, signatures, or secrets that tasted like betrayal. I offered him a stool, poured 2 espressos, and slid one across. I found something, I said, pulling out the letter from the hidden drawer, the one signed WW. Harlan read it slowly, his eyes tightening at the edges. I thought you might know who WW is. He didn't answer right away. He just stared at the letter like it was a ghost holding a knife. Walter Whitman, he finally said. I leaned in. As in? Yes, Harlan said, exhaling sharply. Chloe's father. He was your grandfather's closest friend once. Partner, in a way. Helped him expand, flirted with investing in a second location. Until he didn't. Until he took that cake recipe, your family's olive oil cake, and passed it off as his own at a new restaurant in the North End. Called it Whitman's Hearth. Ever heard of it? Barely, I said. It burned down in 1974, Harlan said, shrugging. But not before your grandfather lost half his clientele. Lost part of his name. I sat back in silence, the espresso turning bitter on my tongue. So Chloe didn't just replace me, I said. She was finishing what her father started. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my desk, flipping through the recipe journal my father had given me, my fingers hovering over that torn-out page. Olio d'arancia. The olive oil cake that Chloe had tried to replicate a dozen times and failed. The same cake that built the myth of Whitman's Hearth, that drew crowds before it all went up in smoke. The same cake her father had stolen. And it was time to take it back. I called a meeting with Sasha, Derek, and Leo. We stood around the prep table like generals in a war room. We're going to launch a new menu, I said. 1 week only. We call it the Lost Dishes. Sasha blinked. You're finally doing it. I nodded. I'm going to serve the cake. But she'll know you're coming for her, Leo said. Exactly, I replied. This wasn't just a menu drop. It was a detonation. The campaign ran quietly. Just whispers through our newsletter, a handwritten note on the door, a few text messages to our regulars. The Lost Dishes. Recipes that had disappeared from Boston's culinary memory. The kind that lived only in rumors, forgotten cookbooks, and the stomachs of people who'd stopped believing food could feel like home. That weekend, the line outside Santino's table started at 4:30 p.m. By 6 o'clock, we had to turn away 30 people. One woman cried when she tasted the cake. Said it reminded her of her grandmother's wedding in Naples. Another man drove from 3 towns over just to see if the rumors were true. And they were. Monday morning, the fire came. But it wasn't from Chloe. It was from her investors. A forwarded email landed in my inbox, courtesy of someone on the inside, one of those regulars who used to drop $100 every Thursday at the Iron Fig and hadn't returned since Chloe took over. The subject line, urgent, fraudulent conceptual branding and internal review of IP portfolio. Inside, the language was sharp. Legal. Furious. They were accusing Chloe of misrepresentation. Of selling them on a brand built around my reputation, my dishes, and my history, then gutting that very foundation to chase TikTok trends and tasting menu fads. It was glorious. They were suing her. And I hadn't even touched her. But I wasn't finished. I had one last card to play. I met with Cameron, my lawyer, and we compiled everything. Customer testimonies. Screenshots of menu revisions. Photos of her new, molecular gastronomy, direction. The key argument? That the Iron Fig 2.0 was no longer a traditional modern hybrid concept, but a radically different entity. We sent the dossier to her legal team with a formal statement. Since Chloe Whitman's establishment has shifted into a wholly different culinary domain, it can no longer claim competitive identity or enforce non-compete terms related to Santino's table. A week later, the lawsuit vanished. Just like her credibility. The final blow came from the people. I didn't tell them what to say. I just opened the doors and cooked like my grandfather taught me. And they said it for me. Hundreds of online reviews flooded Google, Yelp, TripAdvisor. One after another. This is what the iron fig used to feel like. You can taste the difference. Chloe killed the soul. Santino's table isn't a restaurant. It's a reckoning. The ratings on the iron fig plummeted. Chloe tried to launch a media campaign, blamed the online harassment, claimed Marcus fans were sabotaging her. But it was too late. Truth doesn't scream. It whispers. And Boston listened. The final nail came 2 weeks later. An official statement from the Boston Culinary Federation. Effective immediately, the iron fig is no longer in compliance with legacy certification standards. Executive member Chloe Whitman has been removed from the council due to violations of industry integrity. Translation: she was blacklisted. Out of the network. Out of the conversation. Out of the game. I sat alone that night in the back corner of the dining room, lights dimmed, a glass of aged Amaro in my hand. Sasha passed me a slice of olive oil cake, still warm. Outside, the streets buzzed. Inside, it was quiet. And I thought of Walter Whitman. Of Chloe. Of all the people who thought food was something you could steal and sell and brand like a startup. But food? Food remembers. A year later, the walls had changed. Where once there had been cracked tile and silence, there were now shelves lined with old cookbooks and photos of wedding parties long since faded. The copper pot still hung in the same place, centered above the pass, polished just enough to gleam under the prep light. Santino's table had grown. We didn't build up. We built deep, expanded into the adjoining space that used to house my grandfather's barbershop. Knocked down a few walls. Restored the terrazzo floor by hand. Every inch now whispered with memory. Lunch was still family style, 5 rotating pastas, soup, bread, salad, and espresso that could make grown men cry. Dinner became something else entirely, a slow-burning experience, candlelit, deliberate, intimate. No pretension. No showmanship. Just real food. I never put my name on the door. Didn't need to. By now, people knew. We stayed booked out 3 months in advance. Not because of marketing. But because of the way the lamb fell off the bone. Because of the way the orange zest lingered in the olive oil cake. Because of how it felt to sit down at a table and feel like you were being remembered, not served. On Mondays, when the restaurant was closed, I taught. It started small, 3 students from a local community college. Then 5. Then 10. Word spread that Chef Santino didn't just teach technique, he taught philosophy. Most of them came from nothing. Kids who couldn't afford culinary school. Some worked 2 jobs. Some had records. All of them had hunger, and not just the kind that lives in your stomach. They reminded me of myself, before I ever held a chef's knife. When I thought success came in steel and fire and precision, not patience and loss and memory. I told them the truth. That recipes aren't sacred. But moments are. It was a Thursday evening, and I was trimming lamb shanks for Mrs. Henderson. She came in every week. Same time. Same seat. Same order. I never wrote it down. She didn't talk much anymore, but her eyes still closed on the first bite, just like they did the very first time. That was enough. The front bell rang as I was plating. I looked up. And saw her. Chloe. She stood just inside the entrance, barely framed by the glow of the dining room. No entourage. No tablet. No smirk. Her hair was different, shorter, less styled. Her makeup, if there was any, had faded from hours of weather and maybe something heavier. Her eyes scanned the room, stopping briefly at the framed Providence Journal Review hung above the host stand. The heart of the iron fig didn't disappear. It just moved down the block and found its true home. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. She looked at the packed tables, at the families eating slowly, at the cooks working like a symphony behind the pass. And I think in that moment, she finally understood. That all the branding, all the investors, all the engineered menus and aesthetic lighting, none of it mattered. Not when you couldn't cook a single dish that made someone feel something. She turned to leave. I said nothing. Not out of bitterness. But because there was nothing left to say. She stepped back outside, swallowed by the evening. Mrs. Henderson raised her glass toward me. I smiled and nodded, wiping my hands on my apron. She didn't know what had just happened. Or maybe she did. Either way, the answer wasn't in any headline or lawsuit. It was right there in her eyes, misting over as she took another bite of lamb. Later that night, after service, I sat alone at table 12 with a glass of Amaro and the journal my father had finally entrusted to me. The missing page, Olio d'Arancia, 1973, had never been replaced. But I no longer needed it. I'd rewritten it in every plate we served. I thought about Walter Whitman. About how long a theft can echo. About the damage done when you take something that was never yours to begin with and try to profit off its soul. And I thought about Chloe. About how her empire, built on my recipes and her father's shadow, had crumbled not because I took revenge, but because the people she tried to fool remembered where the truth lived. They say reputation is everything. But that's not true. Reputation can be bought. Can be borrowed. Can be faked. What matters isn't what they say about you. It's what they taste when you're not in the room. Real legacy can't be stolen. It lives in hands, in memory, in the unspoken rituals between the cook and the flame. Thieves eat for a season. But those who feed from the heart, they feed generations.